It's a beautiful day in podcast land. I'm so honored to bring to you today's guest. He's an inspiring broadcaster and a prolific interviewer who's done something like 3,500 plus interviews. His name is Jake Feinberg of the Jake Feinberg Show, and he's based out of Tucson, Arizona. He is a radio host on 1210 AM radio. He has a show that goes every Saturday from 12 to 2. And he's kind of become known in his circles as the jazz guy. But really, he's done everything. I mean, interviews with people and names so big, like from Mr. Rogers to Bill Cosby before all the allegations and everything crazy. Just talking to him about music from, names like George Duke to James Gatson, Stanley Clarke to Kenny Burrell, Pat Martino, which he gets into the podcast about and talks really deeply about how much Pat Martino changed the direction of his life. He's interviewed guys like Dr. John and Alan Toussaint. He's even interviewed guys in the North Indian world like Zakir Hussain, Alam Khan, Aishish Khan, and it's so beautiful to connect with him on so many levels about so many of the similar things we have in our paths. He's a guy that I definitely look forward to meeting down the road and getting into more conversations with and having more podcasts and interviews and hoping that I can inspire him in some way because what he does is so amazing, and I hope that he just tweaks a couple of things to get all of his conversations and everything he does in podcast form like this, because not only is it there for people to access very easily for people to listen to all of the different interviews you do, but it's always going to be there. And he's an amazing guy. He's an inspiring guy that's just driven. He's about to be arriving into the amazing city of New Orleans as this podcast hits the world. And I wish him the best. I mean, he's so infectious in his drive and his desire to want to fulfill this sacred journey, as he calls it, that he's on. And I love meeting people like this because it reaffirms what you're doing and it makes you really realize that the path is unfolding in front of you and that life is going to be all right. And so without further ado, I'm so honored to bring to you and kind of have turned the tables because Jake Feinberg really, he found me when he came to town to interview the great Tootie Heath in Santa Fe, New Mexico, who recently moved here. And upon interviewing Mr. Heath, he came down to Albuquerque and we did an interview on Wednesday before my usual jam session. And the place that we did the interview at had not the best of receptions, internet reception where we were. So the interview didn't really air. And I'm honored that we got to do a part 2 here at my house, and I got to have him on my podcast, which is what I'm about to bring to you guys, as well as the interview that we did that we reference and we talk about a lot, which went up on his Facebook page and is a Facebook Live page that I also shared on my Facebook page. I also recorded it on my phone, so I'm uploading it up to my YouTube page. You're able to find it and check it out there. I recommend that. We get into such things like DMT, and how the song, in similar ways that LSD is represented, like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, was with the band The Beatles. I use DMT, like Deep Mystical Telepathy, which is one of the songs on my original album. We get into all of those things, so I hope you enjoy the podcast, and I'm honored. I'm truly honored to bring someone like this on the podcast. This defines what this podcast is about. It's about art, talk, and music. And this guy totally defines the art of talk and the art of broadcasting and interviewing. It's nice to turn the tables a little bit, even though, he's such an amazing interviewer and taught me a lot and turns the table a little bit on me sometimes. Or maybe it's just that I talk a lot. But hey, it's a wonderful conversation, and I look forward to sharing this and the ones in the future to come. Now, he picked this song, which is a pretty great song. It's by Donald Byrd, and it's called The Little Rasta. All right, my man. Welcome to Art Talk Music. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
It's an honor to be here, Claudio.
Oh, truly an honor to have you, my man. What an amazing experience it's been getting to meet you over the past couple of days, but beyond that, just kind of see how everything is connected and how everything continues unfolding even more interwoven. It's beautiful, man.
I consistently, I guess that's the whole game of life. You keep doubting in the true nature of things. Because there's so much distraction and also, just self-doubt and stuff. But, it's to connect with spirit cats based on intuition and instinct, and then being able to turn that into something tangible. It's like, there's a magic there.
Now, where did you get started with this, man? Because I know you do radio host, but is that what you went to school for? Or like what inspired you to start doing all this?
Yeah, no, I went to Boston University from 96 to 2000 and got my degree in broadcasting. So I knew that I was in TV, which I never was comfortable staring at the camera.
Yeah. Right.
But I'd do like sports highlights and news. And so I knew that I knew what I was gifted with, but I was too insecure. I was 20 years old. I did some baseball on the radio for a minute.
But you got into it before, like college, right? I mean, like when was the radio love?
I was like, like a freak. Like I was on the back deck after watching the Mets games in New York, and I was announcing a full 9-inning game in my own fantasy world, looking to my reflection. Through the door, right? So I was into sports. I was cutting out box scores. I was memorizing statistics. It sort of just fed into
how cool, man.
And so I was a sports fanatic, but I walked away. Yeah, so it started way before.
So it started, but like what? Like your parents were watching like baseball, basketball, and you were like watching the announcers, and at some point you were like, I wish I could do that. Or like what?
My dad was a passionate baseball fan, and he always tells me that we were taking a cross-country trip, and I think we were in the middle of Mississippi, and at the time, ESPN really wasn't even around, and TBS was the only national station where that you could pick up anywhere in the country.
Wow.
And the Braves were awful at that time, but Ted Turner owned them, so they showed all the Braves games. And my dad recollects that in this hotel in Mississippi on some dog day of summer on this cross-country trip, he just looked over on the bed, and I was staring at the game, and I fixated on the whole process. From the TV angle, I had not yet gone to a game itself.
Yeah.
But at that point, it became locked in, and I started to, being that I am a character, it was just like I started to develop my voice as a young, totally inexperienced broadcaster, but I was doing it with baseball. I fell in love at that point, 5 years old. So.
5 years old, to baseball, to journalism, or to broadcasting at Boston. Now, were you from that area, or where were you born?
New York, Long Island, Stony Brook, Long Island, and then I went to Boston University for college. But I didn't know myself. I walked out of BU, and I gave it a go in Tennessee. I did the Tennessee Smokies baseball games on the radio. I did the back 3 innings.
What was that with?
It was a Double-A team for the Toronto Blue Jays.
Okay.
It was not really in retrospect, it was all a blessing, but it stopped before it really got going. And I kind of just was like, I really just want to find something more secure. And I made so I walked away from that entire degree.
Yeah.
Because basically you were on 6-year contracts. A 6-month contract, so it was very transient. I mean, you could get a gig and maybe lock in with a group. I didn't fit in the middle of nowhere, Tennessee. It just was not going to happen.
Right.
Kodak was the name of the town. Kodak.
What is that close to in Tennessee?
I think Nashville.
I'm sorry, Nashville. Okay.
Tallahassee's Florida, but I think Nashville.
Chattanooga. I don't know why I said Tallahassee.
And so it was too transient at that point in my life, and but at that point I had already. What I am is an investigative rogue journalist, because at that point when I made a series, when I got that gig, I was in the minor league stands of the minor league teams in Long Island, doing demo tapes of announcing the games, like an inning.
Interesting. Wow.
And putting together those demos.
Yeah.
Okay. And I was also tracking down Bob Costas. I don't know if that name rings a bell. I mean, he's a prolific sports analyst and
I've heard the name.
Broadcast.
Okay,
I mean,
wow.
you're just a babe. But
yes, sir.
Bob. Anyway, so I was tracking him. I mean, he called me one night. He's an iconic sports figure in the world.
And he called you.
He called. Well, I mean, I had a message into him, and he talked to me for like a half hour.
Wow.
So I had already, my passion for reaching the source was undeniable at that point. So I'd already, in the sense that when you look at my situation now, starting back in 2011, I didn't start with the idea of interviewing musicians or artists, but
right.
I've tracked them all down, I realized, I said, who's accessible? Who's when I decided, I said, who's still going to tell me the truth? Because I don't want to do what everybody else is doing.
Who's still going to tell me the truth? That's reaching to real curiosity from what you were talking about earlier. Investigative. I mean, that's the true journalist in you, and that love for finding that out as well as sharing that, right? Because
finding out about myself too.
Oh yeah, along the way.
The truth. I mean, everybody has their own truth. So for me, it was I had to push myself into a totally insecure. The insecure way is the secure way. It's like I had to push myself into that route. And the guys who I first really connected with were the unsung black jazzers. A lot of West Coast guys like Henry the Skipper Franklin and Calvin Keyes and Chester Thompson. A lot of these, badasses. But jazz. A lot of the chronicles and the journalists, they're all on the East Coast. They're downbeat. It's all like East Coast, right? So the West Coast always gets. It's just all of a sudden because I was in Tucson, and then I realized. But back to the point of searching, when I made a decision, I said. I was at my dear friend Neil Diamante's house in Tucson at the Rabbit Ranch, which was like a communal place. And I had this, I was on the radio for about 3 months, and I had been doing, stuff on education and immigration, stuff that, that my daughters, that I thought meant something. But I was like, this is soulless because I'm talking to people that have an agenda, pundits, analysts. It's not going to. So I said, what do I love? I said, I love my family. I love my kids, love my wife. I'm going to, but I love my records. But beyond the music, I reached one day at the Rabbit Ranch. I'm sitting there playing table tennis, smoked, we were pretty lit up. And actually, I started really smoking a lot of marijuana again at that point. I had taken quite a time.
This was 2010,
2011. Right in that. I started my show also. Gabrielle Giffords, she was almost assassinated in Tucson. There was this is going back a ways, but I don't know. She was saved miraculously. I started my show the day after she was nearly assassinated in Safeway. Whoa. So I was sort of, in that box. But when I realized that, I said, I can reach inside the records and pull these cats out because they don't have handlers.
Yeah.
They don't have handlers. Right. Rolling Stone, they're going to go after... Mick Jagger or, Ringo or all these luminary cats. And that's fine. They have the brand name, and I guess that's what matters if these guys are going to grant an interview or not. But there are so many cats underneath that are totally insane, that are stars. And the first cat. So I look up online. I said, check out Pat Martino. Wow. Look up his website. Goes down to contact. I'm still working at a school. So I went into teaching. And so I was teaching at the time, and I was, I sent him an email. I said, Pat, I do a local radio show on. At the time, it was the Jolt 1330 AM. It was a hardwire station, and in Tucson. I said, I do a local radio show in Tucson. I've long appreciated your spirit, and I didn't even know what I was asking him, but I did know I was asking him to come on for an interview.
Yeah.
Within that day, he got back to me. He's like, it would be my honor.
Wow.
So at that point, it was like we did this transcendent 2-hour interview.
Wow.
And I didn't even have my voice at that point, but Pat was basically...
And he called in.
Called into the show, local Tucson radio. And it was a... I left... At that point, I started to transcend this planet. And Pat instilled so much confidence in me.
Wow.
But when I got out of that, I said, wait a minute. If Pat's that accessible, then all these other cats who are not... Pat, Joe Pesci, Pesci called me one day. He was feeling me out because I asked, this is a great, just a little sidetrack. Pesci was a doo-wopper. He loved doo-wop. But after his gigs in Jersey, he would drive across whatever bridge it is to Harlem to see Pat play with Willis Jackson at Small's Paradise.
Wow.
Okay? And then when Pat, I don't know if you know about Pat, but he had that brain aneurysm.
Of course.
So
Where he
you know
forgot
this.
everything and had to relearn everything.
Okay.
It's an amazing story about
It
Pat
is.
Martino. If no one knows that, you need to go online right now and check out what happened to Pat Martino, because it's an inspiring story, especially as a guitar player. To know about Pat Martino's story is a necessity.
Well, and there's a great DVD actually that I haven't watched, but I'm sure it's great. I mean, the point is that he woke up in 1980 and he didn't recognize anybody at his bedside. So anyway, he relearned the guitar, like you said. Check out Pat Martino. He's the man. In our second interview, probably 3 years later, or third interview, I mean, it was insane. But he told me this story in 2003. So this is like 20 years after the aneurysm, right? 20. He's playing at the Blue Note, okay? And mid-set, Pesci goes backstage. Pesci's there. And he's like, "Hey, Pat, you remember me?" Because remember, his memory was gone.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
Yeah, right.
Didn't remember his parents, let alone the apparatus. He didn't recognize his parents. So his memory was gone. Pesci walks in, he goes, "Hey, Pat, you know who I am?" That's what he said. "You know who I am?" Pat goes, "Yeah, you're Joe Pesci. You're the movie actor." He's like, "No, Pat, you don't remember, do you?" Pat's like, "No." He's like, "I remember what you used to drink at Small's Paradise." He goes, "You used to drink a mint julep." And at that point, Pat just flashed back to 68, 66, 67 and was like, whoa. So Pesci and him go back to that. And Pesci's in that DVD. I encourage anybody to check it out.
Now, do you know what the name of the DVD is?
Pat Martino, A Life. I mean, there's some, it's
Something
cosmic.
like
it's
that.
so beyond cosmic.
Look it up, of course.
Anyway, the
through
point is that,
Google.
because of Pat, at a certain point, I had the credibility because of the way I started to find my voice and be proactive and create constantly.
Yes.
It was inspiring.
Wow.
And so Pat was willing to. Pesci called me from his home.
Wow.
And nothing ever came of it. We talked for 10 minutes. I held my own. It would have been, again, I was still just local Tucson.
Yeah, of course.
But so I realized all these guys have tangents. At that time in music, everyone was full. They were not fully connected.
Yes.
So these enclaves would form. And then you find out. So anyway, that was that. And from there, I started to realize that all these guys were accessible. And, before Ndugu Chancellor played on Thriller and became this studio. I mean, he was always a monster studio guy. Ndugu, rest in peace, was playing with Hampton Hawes in the early 70s, like ferocious electric jazz.
Yeah.
Like Hampton Hawes was the last dude to be, he was pardoned by JFK. He was the last person to be pardoned by JFK.
Wow.
So I started to dive into all these bastions. And next thing, it's George Duke, and then it's Jack DeJohnette, and it's Dave Brubeck, and it's all these fucking crazy unsung jazzers. I got totally obsessed with Cal Tjader. It started to go deeper and deeper. I hit Bob Weir from the Grateful Dead, which was epic. All right, and I started to realize a couple years in, when I was getting stronger, that my show was not just because I was getting pigeonholed as he interviews jazz musicians, and people still say that. Because they have their own, whatever that means. But I realized, I said, once you start interviewing Jorma Kaukonen, Taj, Gordon Lightfoot, John Densmore, it's no longer just jazz musicians.
Without a doubt, man.
And you realize, though, that Densmore and Jim Keltner and all these guys, Greg Errico from Sly Stone, they were all jazz lovers. And they incorporated that inflection into that incredible psychedelic rock. So all of a sudden, I'm off on this new tangent, okay? And then I'm into bluegrass, okay?
Wow,
and then the Indian stuff came in right away with Ali Akbar. It was the Connoisseur Society
How
stuff.
did that stuff come about? Do you remember?
This is good. To go back. So, I loved very esoteric music. So I reached into the records and pulled the cats out. And then I was determined, if Ali Akbar Khan wasn't around, well, okay, what about Mahapurush Mishra, his tabla player?
Wow.
Oh, he's gone. Oh, but Alam Khan is still around, so I'm going to go get him and marry. Wow. And then I'm going to go to get every single tabla student that wound up graduating from there. Vince Delgado, Pete Magadini, Ray Spiegel. I've interviewed all those cats. Pete Magadini's a monster jazz drummer.
Yes.
Vince Delgado was of Mexican descent and wound up in the Mission playing Middle Eastern like instruments, dumbeg and all this.
Sure.
Crazy. But he was also going to see Thelonious. He was going to see Dizzy Gillespie at the Jazz Workshop, and the place was full of marijuana smoke. So then all of a sudden I was like, wait, societally, of course you know this, but society and culture is reflected in the music.
Without a doubt.
So then I went to the Merry Pranksters, and I went to the acid tests, and I went deep in...
To connect the two. To see the fabric of the music
especially
and
with
the
jazz,
psychedelics.
especially with music.
Sure, man.
Because what those cats were telling me was that in 61... Because Bill Evans, because all that incredible stuff was happening with Scotty LaFaro, Paul Motion, all that stuff. It was beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
One of the Merry Pranksters, George Walker, dear friend of the program, he went to the Jazz Workshop one night and he saw Rahsaan. I think it was just
Roland Kirk.
It was just Roland Kirk at the time, and Dizzy. He said what they were playing was not jazz. It was psychedelic jazz. It was rock jazz. People were screaming at the top of their... Now, I'm sure DMT might have played a role. Who knows? Okay. But the point is the music was so out and people were still dancing to it.
Yeah.
And I'll shut up in a minute, but one of my critiques now is like, I'm listening to this 73 Grover Washington Jr. album in the car, and it's before... he brought up these Hungry Cats from Philly. They're playing What's Going On with Marvin Gaye at a blistering tempo.
Yeah.
They're playing funk and soul, and after every tune, the audience claps.
Yeah.
I would have been dancing. My biggest problem with music today is that people come up and tap me on the shoulder with improvisational music, and they say, "You're blocking my view. Can you sit down?" And I say to them, "What?" I don't want to get my jaw broken.
Those are the people that get offended or look at you nasty and turn to look at you when you clap, or when you're making noise, and when you're going, "Whoa, play that saxophone, come on!" It's like
I'm talking about the fact that music was made for dancing.
Oh, and the music is made for enjoying.
And so, how did we learn to just sit there and stare at facilities
and
just stare? That's bullshit.
Yeah, it's the evolution of how people listen or accept music. We were talking about Bobby Shue a little bit the other day, and Bobby talks often. Since he moved here, he's become quite a fixture and done a lot of shows in a lot of different settings, and he always dislikes when people clap during the music, because he feels like it interrupts the music, like you're taking attention away from the music, which to some extent I understand, but I don't know. I don't know what the etiquette is now. It continues changing, and especially now with phones.
It goes back to what you were talking about in our Facebook Live interview with this the lack of acceptance of ritualistic and spiritual transmissions.
There's no way that people get indoctrinated. You know what I'm saying? There's no way.
You know this. I don't need to explain it. I'm just saying music is made for pacification now at the pop level. There's a lack of authenticity in music because you can have, people say, "How do I sound?" "Terrible. We'll fix it. Come on up." Just because you have a Twitter following and you look really hot.
Got you mellotone, got you melodone. Autotune. Come on. All that stuff will fix everything.
But I think you're one of the cats that could bring us out of the morass anyway.
Man, I just hope that what you're talking about earlier with being honest, man, saying something honest, because that's all we can do. Like, the people that I love and the people that I admire the most are people like, there's this artist named Sturgill Simpson, and I don't know if you're hip to him or not, but he's an amazing country singer, and he's a psychedelic country singer.
I dig.
And
is he in the country or is he in the West Coast?
No, he sings like Waylon Jennings.
Well, where does he live though?
He lives in Nashville, Tennessee now, but he's from Louisville, Kentucky.
And there's still a psychedelic edge to his music?
The thing is that he has a couple songs that are all about psychedelics. And the way I got tipped to him was through Dr. Rick Strassman, which is the guy we were talking about in our Facebook Live conversation, who was the doctor.
Fill the audience in.
Yes. So Jake and I were having a wonderful conversation talking about this psychedelic called DMT, which is the short name or the acronym for dimethyltryptamine. And what it is a psychedelic that is rich in the environment. It is naturally produced by our own bodies and our lungs. They found it in rats within their pineal gland, and it's something that when ingested, you experience when you just ingest DMT. It's a psychedelic that lasts really at the top of the experience 10, 15 minutes, unless you go back in and you experience it again. And so it's unlike a lot of psychedelics in that matter, but it's the most intense because within those 15 minutes, you go to the center of the universe. You see things, and every single second, within each second, things are continually changing and more unbelievably and more amazingly. And it's something that I speak about in that song that I played in the Facebook Live interview that I started off with. It's a song off of my album that you can go listen to anywhere. The song is called Deep Mystical Telepathy, and it speaks to the experience of DMT and what it is to go through.
What about the Nashville cat, though? His psychedelic tunes? Or?
So where I'm getting at with all of this is that DMT and the experience of me learning about it and stuff all came when I was, like I was telling you outside, was when I was in New Orleans. I saw the documentary that anyone can go see. It's called DMT, the Spirit Molecule, and it's based off of the book which entail the studies and everything that happened in 1989, 90, 91, 92 with Dr. Rick Strassman at the University of New Mexico when he did the first opened up studies on psychedelic research, or he conducted the first psychedelic research, that FDA approved ever since they stopped doing psychedelic research after the whole hippie movement back in the day.
Well, no, let's be clear.
Yeah.
When it was legal.
When it was legal, what do you mean?
Meaning he carried on that research.
He carried on that research after it became illegal.
Because it was legal for some time. Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
You can go to the League for Internal Freedom in San Francisco and get a sheet of because it was being made by the chemists in the university.
The chronology. Yeah, of course.
Berkeley.
Oh yeah. And he had Dr. Rick Strassman entails in this documentary about how he had other chemists from other universities create the actual batch of DMT that he used in these studies. And where I'm getting at with all this is that when I got so deep into learning about everything, buying the book, getting it, I, like you did when you talked about going on Pat Martino's website and just found the contact, info, tried to track down this gentleman that I so admired and wanted to hear his story as well as share with him the experiences that I'd had in that very first year after a year and a half or a year and a couple months of studying this substance. I just wanted to go meet him and talk to him. And man, the conversation we had, I emailed him. He was gracious enough to get back to me a little while later and agreed to meet me. I was going to drive up to wherever he was living. He was living in Gallup, and I agreed to come meet him for breakfast and just talk over breakfast.
Recorded or just
conversation. But I'm going to have him on the podcast. We're definitely going to get together and talk about a lot of stuff because he's written a couple books since.
Well, I'd love to catch a hang with the cat too.
Absolutely, man. He's amazing. He's quite a gentleman, quite a soft spoken, but just such profound.
What was it
story,
about? Was the documentary? I want to go back to the doc for a second. Was it that you believed that it was? You needed to pursue this experience because it was short-circuited societally too quickly?
No,
was there any conspiracy
I was
theory?
inspired by the documentary because it entailed so many people's stories, and it got me hip to this book, which entails so many various people from various backgrounds, stories of why they came towards it, why they came at it, their experiences, and when you hear all these things and what it did for so many people's lives, as far as when they went deep and jumped off the edge, so to speak, it inspired me that. The search that I had and the inclination that I'd had to look for something psychedelically, which made me truly look inside.
How did you avoid acid?
The idea of acid just kind of turned me off. Mushrooms was really the first thing that I'd heard about, and that was in my circles.
Did you do mushrooms too?
I didn't do mushrooms
So you didn't
until that same year that I found out about DMT. So 2012 in New Orleans was a setting that I found out about DMT through that documentary. And at the end of that year, when I'd come back home in December of 2012, I did my very first experience with psychedelics, which was mushrooms. And so I went in deep. I went in not just deep one day, but twice, because I had such a profound experience the very first day. I felt like I had a language start to be decoded to me, and I started learning and getting this message.
Can you give an example of what you saw? That was so clear.
There wasn't something that I saw. It was something more that was like a message. It was like I'd close my eyes. The first night I'd come to an experience where I'd close my eyes. I was laying in the bed in almost a fetal position, just hearing these words as I described to people. It was as if these gibberish sounds like shnabada, 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 shnabada it's a weird sound to hear, but this idea of vowels and noises with our lips that is created was automatically amplified in an etude like Bach theme and variation. And what I mean by that for people that are not musicians listening is that it's a simple melody that then is stated, and then all of the variations are maybe 20, 30 different possibilities of all the different outcomes that you can take that melody and where you can take it, all the different variations of how you could perceive it or play it. And all of a sudden, these gibberish sounds were being play to me like a symphony. And all of a sudden, when I'd gotten one of them and understood it and said it out in my words, all of a sudden it changes.
Mind blowing.
It changes into another thing, you know. And I had such a profound experience through this and through seeing colors move and faces melt and all these different experiences that the next day I was like, I'm gonna do it again.
Was it?
And that's not a good idea. If you have done mushrooms, you know that 2 days in a row is not a good thing if you don't know what you're doing.
or if you're not.
Or it's the best thing, and I really needed it because it changed my life. That second experience provided the perspective and made me face the deepest, darkest fears that I'd had at that moment in my life to be able to embrace the next year, which was then when I truly opened up to the flower that was DMT. And after that year that I'd had of experiencing DMT twice, December of that year was when I went and met Dr. Rick Strassman. I believe it was November or December of 2013 that I met Dr. Rick Strassman. And he turned me on to Sturgill Simpson. Coming back full story to where, you know, why I brought up that psychedelic country guy is because Dr. Rick Strassman said to me, like I said in the Facebook interview outside, when I graduated from school in 2013 at the University of New Mexico, I had in mind that I wanted to go to Nashville and be singer-songwriter, solo artist. I wanted to do my own thing. And when I was going to go do that, it was around the time that I went and met Dr. Rick Strassman. And in telling him my aspirations of going and doing that, he said to me, oh man, I should hip you to this guy that lives in Nashville that just wrote me an email, sent me his CD and everything, and told me that I helped inspire him to write his album. Which was amazing music, man. Anyone that has not heard of Sturgill Simpson, you need to go right now and check out who Sturgill Simpson is because he just won some Grammys the last year. The year before that, he's up there with some of the big names in country now. And I had the honor of just kind of being pen pals with him. I never got to go meet him in person in Nashville because he was on the road the time that I was in Nashville. And by the time I realized it wasn't for me, I left. I didn't get a chance to meet him, but have seen his amazing success and his growth ever since first hearing about him through Dr. Rick Strassman to seeing him blow up, win Grammys, and get so much attention, man, which is so awesome for him. But he's a psychedelic country singer. So one of his songs is called Turtles All the Way Down. And I wish I could play it, you know, but the song, all you people out there that are curious, go listen to it because it speaks about all of the psychedelics that he had and what they taught him. And a lot of music critics, when they're writing about the song, are trying to decode what this song is about. And he does this awesome NPR Tiny Desk concert performance where he says to people, he says, oh, everyone's trying to figure it out, but it's just about drugs. And he goes into his song, which is powerful, man. He's got a voice like Waylon Jennings that is gorgeous, man, and he's singing a truth. He's singing a truth, and what I love about his story and having learned about him and then having learned more about him because he's been a guest on Joe Rogan's podcast. He's done a couple long-form interviews and told his story. He's lived a full life. He's lived the life of working on a rail yard, of being in the military and whatever branch he was in, and living those lives to then come at being able to create music as a craft with a sense of gratitude and a sense of direction that no young person who's just out of high school and has drive is going to be able to come at, because the experience of Sturgill Simpson and the profound experiences, life experiences that he had to come into writing his albums and then come into his next couple albums and get a lot of acclaim like he has been thanks to him working his ass off. And him living that hard life before, because he moved to Nashville when he was younger and wanted to be a guitar slinger, had a electric telly, trio, and was doing his thing, and then, went away with his girl and was working on, a rail yard or something like that. And then he came back to it when he was older because his wife, who is now his wife, he's told him, if you don't go do this, you're going to be an old, bitter old man. And fuck that. So go do it. And he went to Nashville and blew the fuck up, And so I share that and bring it all together with DMT and stuff like that because it's the unveiling of the path as it continues to unfold in front of me. And this podcast is an awesome opportunity because I know I'm going to get to talk to Dr. Rick Strassman. I'm going to get to talk to people in general about psychedelics and have these conversations, even with musicians, because the amazing thing that you're doing where you're going out and interviewing all these people, as well as the psychonauts who were of the time and could connect the fabrics of what the experience societally was, societally, I don't think that's a word, but at the time, it's a beautiful connection. My professor at the University of New Mexico loved the story and learning about drugs and their relationship with jazz musicians.
Well, I have in my archives several interviews with Ken Babbs, who was the Kesey's right-hand man, I have, hours of radio of him talking about how they were so blown away by this Rasan Dizzy Fest that Walker brought Kesey the next night. And then they brought Roland Kirk back to La Honda and they ate acid. And Kesey was playing flute.
Wow.
And then every year in Eugene, they had something called the Poetic Hoo-Ha. Okay,
Eugene, Oregon,
where Kesey's where the family farm.
I didn't know
was.
that. That's where he's from.
Springfield.
Gotcha.
And so
Springfield, Oregon, not Missouri.
They're right. There's a lot of Springfields.
Illinois.
His family had a creamery there.
Okay.
The Grateful Dead did a huge benefit concert that's online, Veneta 72, but to support the creamery. But Kesey ate acid with Mingus and with Roland Kirk. And then Kirk would come back to these poetic hoo-has and say, I'm going to do something that's going to blow your mind. And he'd put two horns in his mouth and play the same note on different horns for a minute and 20 seconds.
Wait, so you're saying that idea of him doing that came from his psychedelic experiences?
I think it had a huge.
What do you think?
Well, I mean, listen. All I'm saying is that first of all, we're talking
connecting the dots.
Well, and it's a cross section of humanity. Mm-hmm. Here you have a blind a brilliant African American musician. Mm-hmm. All right, yeah. And you have these essentially poets and experimenters that were appreciated that incredible art and wound up pulling them in to their scene.
Yeah.
So that made the scene more vibrant. It wasn't rejected. The marination of all those different things wasn't rejected. It was enhanced. And so the fact that you'd have Rasan in Eugene. But it's cool. I just felt like as I went along, unlike a lot of writers, like you said, there's people that are paid to dissect what the meaning of a song is. I've never, even the poet cats Peter Yarrow or Lightfoot or George Clinton Merle Haggard I interviewed.
Wow.
And I'm talking to Haggard. Haggard was, he was in the hole in San Quentin. And he was making hit records. He was arrested 12 times, and he was still. All I'm saying is it started to go more towards society, my radio show, because I said Reagan expunged his record in 1980 or whatever, okay? But the point is that Merle Haggard would have gone away for life after one felony count, okay? And he was able to sustain. We are a more punitive society today, more cruel society, and there's a direct reflection in the automation of the music.
Yeah.
And there's a correlation there, and it's not quantifiable. But when I reached to the pranksters and knew that they had tapped into the headiest jazz that was going on, that there was this blend of psychedelics, then it went to I haven't gotten to Ram Dass yet, but I'm on the doorstep. I've interviewed Krishna Das twice, Wavy Gravy four times.
Sure. Wow.
So I have been asking these questions. And, it's so great because it really opened their view of humanity on the bandstand, which is why you had, a lot of incredible chemistry. And, but I've done everybody from Julian Priester to, the point is that these guys the black musicians were paid just enough to keep going. Just enough.
Yep.
But they were looked at as royalty. Dizzy was considered a genius by all people because of this new language.
The craft, right.
And so it's all these vectors. It's music as a profession. How is that viewed? Is music a musician's gift to the world? I disagree. I believe it's a full-on serious profession that people should be paid for and they can make a living at. Where we've gotten to the point now where you have younger cats who, with no name recognition, they got to pay to play or play for the door.
Right. Which we were talking about the other day.
You stifle culture. And if you stifle culture, that's how you get another Hitler. And I've interviewed 30.
It's an interesting.
I've interviewed enough of the cats to just go on that intuition. Know that, they've told me that themselves. Harlem, the culture was out in the streets. Right out in the streets. You had, boxers. Sugar Ray Robinson had a jazz club. Mm-hmm. All the stuff was right there. It was very black and it was very open. And all that stuff now, you go to Harlem now, it's been gentrified. Everything's pushed off the street. Yeah. Music is made for pacification. I'm just telling you, the more formulaic we get, and the more that younger, like my daughters, only listen to the most insane music. So they're hip to it.
I mean, I think now more so than before, there's this relationship with what people consume of, there was a necessity more so for what the music was and what it did for people back then, man.
What you're saying is, and this is a question I ask a lot of cats, how has the significance of music changed in our culture?
I mean, it's a deep question, bro.
That's what you just said.
It's a great question.
What you just said, I've crystallized that into a question because I've basically been asking that for 7.5 years.
And the introduction via all of the technology that has come about in this age is flooded people's ability to be able to not just allow the music to take you on a trip, but almost kind of need that because you get it and it's like a good drug, man. And that's what music is and was for so many people. And what's so deep is when music is connected directly with some of those psychedelic experiences, because then that music, every time you hear it, almost takes you back to that trip. Music is indeed why, the very first time, I don't know if you know this or not, but there's actually new brain neurons, or there's neural pathways that are created inside of your brain every first time you hear a song. And that is why anytime you hear an old song, it takes you back to the place you were when you heard that song. The moment you were dealing with whatever, with a girlfriend, or like where you were, you know what I'm saying? Like
you're teleported back to
you're teleported. It's photogenic, that is imprinted on you. And the experience of that being able to, of music being able to do that for people has been taken so much down, or been diminished, diluted, because of all of the technology and all of the accessibility, man. Because now all of a sudden it's not like I got into Miles Davis, I went and bought one album, because that's all I can afford right now, and Nefertiti is it, and it's amazing, and it blew my mind, or whatever. But nowadays it's you get into Miles Davis and you can go watch one of the millions of videos that are out there of him, or you can listen to one of the hundreds or thousands of CDs in his discography now at the click of a couple buttons.
I knew that, to see the luminary, when I started to interview Cedar Walton, for instance, the piano player, or Jimmy Owens, the trumpet player, and then all of a sudden on the webpage where the interview was housed, I'm getting Billy Cobham posting a comment about Cedar Walton. And I realized, I said, you know what? It's more important to pass the credibility threshold with the cats than to make a bunch of money. And so at this point, I am connected to almost every musical community of the old school. And I'm beginning, as we just were witness to the last couple of days, beginning to tap into my peer group. And that has been cathartic, because that's one reason we've connected today, because you are part of the younger generation. You're part of our generation, and how the sustainability of music is from the heart and not the head.
Yeah.
And yet you have the dexterity to go back and forth. So
I mean, I'm blessed that the musics that I came into allowed me to veer into old musics as well as new musics, and have the experience of an old blues singer fucking wrench the tears out of me because she's singing about something I'm in some form feeling. You know what I'm saying? I felt that emotion from then on, and I mean, it's not to say that it can't be had now, but that like I was saying earlier, that experience of music being a drug isn't a necessity nowadays like it was,
Let me be clear.
Yeah.
Because you don't have kids yet.
Yes.
Okay.
Not that I know of. Knock on wood.
Right. I mean, and procreation is, I highly recommend it, but it's a cathartic thing and it's a life changer. But, if you have, Kenny Barron said it best. When I asked him at the Rhythm Retreat last week when I was doing a Facebook Live with Ron Carter and Billy Cobham and Kenny Barron, and I'm getting so much stuff out of these guys, and especially Ron, who's a curmudgeon-y guy, and he's talking about being in a gospel group. It's insane. But Kenny said you have to be able to cry if you are going to be touched by a song.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
But my point is about the kids. The younger kids today, because the technology is directly infused, by the time that they are out of the womb, they don't, unless you make a conscious effort as a open-hearted person to teach them how to feel, they're not going to be able to know how to feel. It's very synthetic. Everything's
it is.
The technology.
Yeah. I can agree with that, and
you would see it if you had kids.
Sure. You're right, and I don't have that perspective. But something I wonder about, and I always admire, is the ability of movies to capture
still the most powerful medium.
It is, man.
I think you're right.
It is. And
It's
those
funny you said
movies
that,
and the soundtracks that happen now, just like they were back in the day, you know what I'm saying? Like, have that effect and ability to make you cry by, like, the way the violins just, like, you know, make you weep as Bambi is. You know, the experiences that you see in these cinematic experiences as child especially, it forms your experience with emotions and with being able to feel things, and have music or have a story do that for you. And I think that even though we don't know what's going to happen now with everything, I think that music and storytelling are still there.
Well,
and
I mean, you're
even
100%.
with the scary aspect of, like I was saying, people not having the attention span to feel, like, I'm still fighting against that, man, because I still think that there's
Dude,
a cause.
The right side
you know?
of it, man.
Because
that's the point. I mean, we're fighting.
We're fighting the good fight, man. And so long as we continue fighting it and know what we're doing and why we're doing it, then, like, man, you're right. It's not. We're doing it for a bigger cause. It's not about money. And it's something that inspired me about when I heard your story, because we just met through the online. I mean, and it was an amazing coincidence, but it was
divine. No,
it was
there are no
divine.
coincidences. There are
Yes,
no
sir.
coincidences.
You're right. Excuse me.
I mean, I can't believe you said that.
Divine. It was a divine. It was a divine
Intervention.
Not only
Connection,
intervention, connection that was the unveiling of this web. You know, as you said it, and as I continue to see it, you know, when you were just like, when I was like, what are you doing after this? You're gonna go interview, you know, Mustafa. Oh shit! All right, I know Mustafa. And then you went today, and it was like you were interviewing this lady that you didn't know, and then all of a sudden it was her husband. And then, you know, you're like,
I was on the phone with Claudio. You know, I want to say that you talked about the cinematography, and I want to address something, because I was for a long time. I was, like I said, when I was at BU, I was uncomfortable being in front of the camera, and now I have no problem sticking a camera in anybody's face.
That's awesome.
Okay, so that's one. So you dig that, and then I had another point to make too, but that's you know, I think part of it is instead of going to the movies, because you get up on the bandstand and get stuff out of your system a lot.
Yes.
Okay, and you also sculpt and art. So how do I get stuff out of my system? I'm putting on my own movies. These are in the real time. The improv. You're making this very clear now.
It's a perspective, yeah.
But it's like Facebook Live. I've never had one where I'm like, oh my God, this sucks. I have to turn it off. I've never. It's been like go time. It's my movie.
Yeah.
Over and over and so I'm not. For people out there, technology. They've also given off the impression at a very superficial level that everything is knowable.
Yes.
That through technology, everything is knowable, which is complete. I've diminished that theory completely. I've put it to the woodshed. Okay. And I don't care if only, you know, I mean, I'm affecting serious spiritual energy to the point where, like, I'm at home with my girls and I'm laughing out loud. And my older daughter's like, why are you laughing, Dad? I said, and I'm thinking somebody's reading a transcription of one of my radio interviews and they're getting off on it. I'm hitting the spirit. I can also feel very much when I put something controversial up or something that might be inaccurate. Sure, and I can feel somebody's angst bubbling inside because I've exposed.
Because you're an empath, you know.
I am, but I want to be clear. There's a lot of you're not one of them. There's plenty of artists who are like, what the fuck did I just get into? This guy's blowing out very personal shit that I've never told anybody into public.
It's a vulnerable situation.
But I've sort of owned that. I'm sort of an instigator in some ways.
You just know that that's the way you do it, man.
It's the truth, man.
Yes, sir.
And if those people can't put that out to the public, they got to look themselves in the mirror.
Yeah.
But very few cats have ever come to me and said, you know, I can only count on my hands, literally one hand, and maybe just one or two digits, the amount of cats were like, this wasn't authorized by my people.
Right. Where they freak out or backstep, right?
Because it's the feel.
Not only that, man, but like, especially as not to say just jazz musicians, but I mean, I would hope that all artists and musicians, in feeling the deepest connection with why we're doing what we're doing, are seeking truth, like what you're doing in your artwork and in your craft. And it's why I wanted to have you on today, because you are doing the art of interviewing and the art of broadcasting in your own definition and your own expression of what that is, man. And it's inspiring to see it and hear it as well as, man, like,
freeform improv on the spot.
Bro. And not only that, but like it's exactly what we do on stage. So it's like, hey, I know what he's doing, bro. I fucking love it, man. Not only do I love it, but I want to do something. That's why this podcast has become the opportunity for that.
I mean, why do you need? Why do you have a passion to have another form of expression? I mean, I don't play music live. Okay, I don't do metalworking. I mean, to me, this is like a niche, right? And I've been doing, and like, so why are you so? Why did you start this podcast?
I think it's why we do any craft. Like, why you do anything creatively or like outside the norm of like, you really don't need to do that, but like you're gonna mount all this work and then it's just gonna be there, and then it's like you're doing it because you gotta freaking do it, man. Like, you can't not do it. You'll go crazy, man. And you know what it is when you're just like, man, I don't want to deal with any of the other stuff. I just want to do it. Because when you do it, you're on the path and you feel the connection with what you're, like the path that you're walking, like the life that you're living, like the love that you are feeling and the truth that you are experiencing in the moment, because the truth is ever changing and it is the moment. And like, I think the podcast and starting this up and why it was such a thing for me was because I've always loved podcasts, man. I've always loved conversations, and more than like TV. When, you know, what was amazing when I moved to this house 10 years ago with my brother after graduating from high school, we decided not to have a TV in the house anywhere. We just had a projector for movies and whenever people would want to do that. And it offered me the opportunity to see conversations. And from that, in what you do when you're talking about going out and seeking these people and going to this person and then this person and this person and then this person, that's what I was doing musically when I was not stuck here watching TV, but I was out there saying, holy shit, I played this drummer. Oh, man, and he recommended this drummer. I got to go meet this. Oh, shit, he recommended this bass player. Oh, shit, I got to get hip to this guitar. Oh, shit. So I'm meeting all of these people and unveiling their stories and starting these narratives with people. And there was a series that came on when I was in high school, put on by our local it's our KUNM station, which is like our NPR, public access or public community radio. And they had a series they put out called Jazz of Enchantment. And what it was a 2-part CD that had all kinds of interviews with, over 20 of the people that are associated or have a connection with New Mexico and are famous jazz musicians or have some kind of accolades, like Kevin Hayes, like Eddie Daniels, like Bobby Shue, like Michael Anthony, like Glenn like just so many amazing
Tootie
musicians.
Heath is here too now.
Yes, Tootie Heath is here now.
Tootie's here,
I
baby.
do not believe that he was on that, but I could be.
It doesn't matter.
I could be incorrect.
He just moved here.
But right. But the experience of wanting to recreate that thing that inspired me so much when I was young. They were only a couple minute conversations, man. But I want to use this podcast to retrack all of those people that I love and now know through first learning about them through that and capture their story in long conversation format. Why? Because like music, like art, it's something that you do and you create, and guess what? It's going to be here when you're not here. And your kids and their kids and their kids are going to be able to see that work that you've done and this passion and this amazing, powerful thing that you are driven to do, that you're on the mission of doing, and you continue doing. It's a sacred journey. Say it, man. And,
ayahuasca, man.
And we continue realizing that journey every single day. And and what's beautiful about meeting someone like you, which is not every day, is that you realize that man, the unknown is our biggest variable, and we're not scared of it. And because we're not scared of it, we are offered the opportunity to walk this amazing path and it continue to unfold amazingly in front of us. And sometimes when you think, you know what I'm saying, you aren't going to meet the bills, it's the end of the month, a couple of gigs come in last second, all of a sudden the universe is like, it's taking care of you. Like, you've given all this, and the universe says, no, got you. Like, you were scared there for a second, but I got you. And it's so empowering because this podcast has been literally on my to-do list
Yeah,
for
no,
over like 7, 8, 9 years, because from podcasting and from high schooling back then and hearing that stuff to then hearing podcasts. I started a podcast with my friends in college, but then just stopped it, and then
Yeah, because you don't know what you're doing at that
you
age.
don't know what you're doing,
What
as
the hell
well
are
as
you
like
talking about?
well as like what the hell are you talking about.
Right.
It was a music
radio
variety show.
I mean, I stumbled through those years. It's fun. There was music always. There was a grain. In tracing back, there was always a grain of music in the studio. But literally the radio station at BU had a watt range of like the radius of the building. It didn't even get out of the building. Okay. Before we wrap, I have to say that I received the Dow 5 years ago. So I'm a Taoist.
Tell me about this.
And it was my first spiritual transmission. I was raised. My dad was Jewish. My mom was Catholic, and so they basically raised me agnostic. I mean, I would say that they didn't trust organized religion. Okay. And my dad said, do you want to go get a bar mitzvah or go to church? I said, no. He's like, great. And it was like, they respected people, but they had a hard time with it. And we never, so I wasn't raised, my first spiritual transmission was the Tao. It was my ex-wife, Taiwanese woman from Taiwan. And we met some friends, and the husband was like, this meek, on the surface, a meek, frail, little, beautiful human being.
Yes.
But not big of stature and very mild-mannered. But our families used to get together and the kids would play. And we didn't have conversations like they weren't like this, because
right.
This is a guy who has a PhD in Taiwan, stone genius. He's doing a TA position, being paid TA at the U of A, doing tests on rat feces. But still, like this beautiful man, he's got good kids. And so, we didn't have a conversation longer than 10 minutes before I was like, okay, I used to actually, because of my lack of speaking Mandarin, I just would sort of check out. Just got boring.
Yeah.
But I still love the guy. His name's Kim. And, so he never talked. One day he came up to me and said, I want to be your guarantor. I want you to receive the Tao. And it fundamentally changed my life. And all my inhibitions, all the things that used to preoccupy me, and I wouldn't say paralyze me, but, would hang me up. Mm-hmm. It just... I wouldn't say it's all gone, but most of it fell off. And because what happens in the ceremony, it was in the Holy House in Tucson, in my friend Kim's house, and there's flowing robes and it's all Asian, and then there's plenty of Western people that are receiving it, but it probably only 6 people received it. My ex-wife did, my daughters did. And there's an index card you have, and you put your name on it, and where you were born, the city you were born in, a couple things. Mm-hmm. And after you do a bunch of kneeling, and praying, chanting, you go through, you count to 10. At the end of the ceremony, they burn the index card, and that signifies the end of an old chapter of your life and the beginning of a new one. And this was around the time that I started to really connect with my voice in the music. And I had voices in my head from Dizzy saying, dude, you better take advantage of this, what you got going on. Go and fucking burn. The Tao helped me find my true nature. And there are consequences with that. But the Tao is I surrender to the Tao. That is why all of this stuff happens. And it is, and what you said before, and I will end on this, is that you were talking about the revelations, the visions you had on ayahuasca, and you said you crystallized it. You said, it taught me to look towards, it was away from fear and towards the light.
Towards love.
Thank you.
Yes.
My show is about love. My show is about rhythm. Yeah. Rhythm is love. That is exactly what the Tao did for me. It was, don't look towards, when you said that today, I said, that's the Tao.
That's beautiful.
Don't look that way. And so, Claudio, I mean, I wish you, I can't wait to hear you edit this down. And like,
hey, no, I'm not editing this. Let me tell you, because this podcast, now the favorite thing that I love about podcasting is like there is no rules, man. There is no rules, man. I have no problem. And guess what? I'm going to tell you how long some of the other podcasts are. The podcast that I just did the other day was 2 hours and 40 minutes. And editing, I mean, I had to edit parts of it down because that gentleman is an amazing poet, you know, the first poet laureate of here in Albuquerque, and he works for the mayor's office. So he happened to curse a couple times, and he says, hey, man, the mayor's going to listen to this, and I can't have any F-bombs in there. So I'm going to need you to bleep those out. So in that setting, I edit, but in the setting of...
Let me tell you, though, there's a couple things. Just because you actually are... you follow through better than I do. You mentioned a song before that you said, I wish I could pull it up. Maybe you could edit and infuse that song where you talked about it.
Sure.
Also, maybe...
You're talking about the DMT song, or which song are you talking about?
During this conversation, you said... There's this great song by...
Sturgill Simpson.
Exactly. So maybe
I will definitely end this thing with that.
I'm saying a musical... Yeah. Sometimes what I do...
I love how you did that with earlier because, you know, I listen to a lot of comedian podcasts. My favorite one is the Joe Rogan podcast, but this other one that I listen to is called The Church of What's Happening Now by Joey Coco Diaz, excuse me. He's an amazing Cuban-American podcaster, comedian, I should say, but his podcast always starts where he talks, you know, they do their little bit of an intro, and then they start with a song. And not only that, but every single podcast drops on Mondays, even though he records them, pre-records them on Sunday nights, right? And they drop on Mondays, and every single podcast that he has dropping on Monday, he always plays the same song, which is a Tony Bennett song. I want to be around to pick up the pieces when nobody... It's like, it's a gorgeous song, but like it attaches this feeling of listening to his podcast with music. And he starts it every show with a song, and he ends every show with a different song. And I love that he does that because it takes you not just on the journey of the conversation that was had today, but it rounds it out with this beautiful song that you played at the beginning, man, which, you know, I loved and I hadn't heard before. And now with this Sturgill song, which I'm going to hit you to afterwards, of course, and I'll turn the people on to by ending it. But what I wanted to share with you, man, is that in loving those podcasts and in loving the guy that I am very inspired by, Joe Rogan podcast, who, guess what, happens to have been the guy that narrated the DMT Spirit Molecule documentary that I love and is a big proponent of that. You know what I'm saying? So there was so many deep interwoven connections with DMT, with Joe Rogan podcast, and me wanted to do my own podcast. I mean, I look forward to when I'm going to be able to go on his podcast and talk to him and play the interviewer and do some questions on him because he's always asking and doing everything like that. But the reason I'm bringing all that up and referencing that at this moment is because you were talking about editing earlier. The part of my podcast is that it's raw conversations. And every single part of it stays in there, as well as the hiccups or the this. And, you know, obviously I'll edit out the earlier part that we had during the music and stuff. But I mean, I think the phone
call wouldn't be appropriate.
Right. But I think people listening to the conversation all the way, as well as listening to people as they honestly talk, is how you get to know who you are, man, which is why I wanted to have you on the podcast, because you're interviewing everyone all around, you know, the music circles, the psychedelic circles, all these circles that inspire you, and ain't nobody getting your story. And so I want to just do the first part of this, as well as like inspire you to, you know, start doing your own podcasting with all these amazing guests that you do, because then people will be able to enjoy those podcasts all around the world, and your net will be so much bigger because the work you're doing is profound, my brother. And keep on this spiritual journey, because you're inspiring people like me and all the people around you that you're doing these things with. And so I appreciate you, and I'm honored to have you on the podcast.
Claudio, it was an honor, man. Thank you, my man. I look forward to hearing it.
Hey, absolutely, and I look forward to having you down the road on the next one, part 2, all right?
Peace. Much love. Peace.
I've seen Jesus play with flames in a lake of fire. I was standing in. Met the devil in Seattle. Spent 9 months inside the lion's den. Met Buddha yet another time. He showed me a glowing light within. But I swear that God is there every time I go to the eyes of my best friend. somewhere out there, far beyond this plane. We're reptile aliens made of light, cut you open and pull out all your pain. Tell me how you make illegal something that I'll make an outbreak. Some say you might go crazy, then again it might make you go sane. Every time you take a look inside that old fable book, blinded and reminded of pain caused by some old man in the sky. Marijuana, LSD, psilocybin, DMT, they all change the way I see. Love's the only thing that ever saved my life. So don't waste your mind on nursery rhymes, fairy tales, or blood and wine. There's turtles on the way down the line. So to each their own till we go home. Further realms our souls must roam, to and through the myth that we all call space and time.
You were just listening to Sturgill Simpson, Turtles All the Way Down. And that's from the album Metamodern Sounds in Country Music. It was released in 2014, but you can still get it. So go to his website, sturgillsimpson.com. Check it out and check out everything else he's been up to. His latest album is absolutely one of my favorite albums of all time. It's a letter to his son. And I haven't had a kid yet, and I know that I'm going to someday, but it's just so inspiring to hear someone like that creatively, musically, just do something so beautiful like that. It's called A Sailor's Guide to Earth, and I definitely recommend you go check that one out. I do believe that was the album that won the Grammy for him. And before that, you listened to the great Donald Byrd. And of course, you didn't really even get to listen to Donald Byrd. That's a 16, 17-minute song, but you definitely should go check it out. It's from the album Ethiopian Nights. Ethiopian Nights. I'm going to try that one more time. That was released in 1972. And definitely go check that out. Thank you for listening to Art Talk Music.